join us. So I'm just going to take a moment to do that as well. Becky, good evening. Welcome. Yeah, so I'd like, obviously tonight, we are only going to be doing an hour tonight. I'm significantly tired. It's been a busy week for myself. So we are only going to do an hour tonight, but we're going to jump on board and have a little play too, and hopefully a really good discussion. So like I said, just if you can spend the next couple of moments with that little plus sign and invite anybody you think may enjoy joining us on this chat. Because as we always know, the more people we have, the better the discussion gets, and the better the discussion, more fun we have. And that's what it's all about. Adam, let me make you moderator. Can you hear me loud and clear, mate?
Can you hear me, more importantly?
I can, mate. So that means that we've actually set up the whole thing correctly, which is great and good. So I was just mentioning a minute ago why you were setting up YouTube. Tonight we're going to be talking about when does a hypnotherapist become a professional hypnotherapist? What is a professional? Where does this whole realm sit, and everything as well? But just before we do get started on that, how's your week been, Adam? Has it been all right? Been good?
It's been crazy good. Yeah. It's as many of the regular listeners will know, none of us was here last week for all different reasons. So we've had a bit of a break. But yeah, this last week or so, really positive from a hypnosis point of view, from a business point of view, from an investing point of view, from a personal life point of view. Couldn't be happier, really. I was in Cornwall a week before last. Great, saw my nephew for the first time. So yeah, just generally very positive.
I've seen them pictures. Looks like it's been really, really good. And it's great to see as well. Things have just been positive. Likewise for me. We were just talking offline some very positive things which have been building stuff up as well. So yeah, let's make this even more positive too. So who else has jumped on board? Joe, welcome. Ram, Joanna, mindful hypnotherapist. I wish I knew. Let's have a look. Amanda, welcome. There you go. Just wanted to make sure we know everyone. And Jenny. So like I just said before, if you do know someone who'd like to join in on this chat, who's a fellow hypnotherapist, maybe someone who's looking at getting into hypnotherapy or such like, then please just simply send them a little ping. So when does someone become a professional hypnotherapist? More importantly, when is it that, what is the term professional? Where does it all fall into place? Why is it that, when is it you can class yourself as a professional? Have you got to do X amount of hours? Have you got to do X amount of clients? Have you got to take in so much money to be able to become a professional? Or does it simply come down to a topic we spoke about a couple of months ago of confidence and compliance as well? What's your thoughts on the term professional, Adam?
Off the bat, I would say there's two key elements for me for the meaning professional. One is it your profession? Do you make money from it? I think that's one element. And then there's the competency element. If someone says that's unprofessional, what they're saying is not very competent, not meeting certain standards. So for me, when I saw the title, when does a hypnotherapist become a professional hypnotherapist? I would say there's two significant, kind of milestones there. One, when they actually have not clients that just pay them, but pay them happily and are happy to kind of work with them and refer other people to them. But secondly, when they're, doing a good job, and they're getting, good results for clients and they're doing the techniques well. Because I think a lot of people train in hypnotherapy, and I don't know if anyone else's training was like my training, but effectively, you might spend, one day on like one topic, and you might get the intellectual idea of how, to work with someone with, I don't know, sleep disorders or anxiety or smoking cessation, but that doesn't mean you're competent in it. You might have done a few practice sessions with a few kind of your peers at that point. So for me, being a professional means that you've moved beyond this kind of element of, you're observing, you're learning, to actually you're doing it to a good enough standard that, clients are happy and you can produce the result for them. And for me, I'm obsessed with results. And I think that that kind of helps, because if you are, and you have that NLP frame of there's no failure, only feedback, then you keep refining your approach until you get good at that point. And for me, that's making sure that value has been created for the client. And what I've seen recently in terms of not so much the therapy environment, but the coaching environment, is there is this increasing trend to blame the client. So it's kind of like you've got coaches saying, oh yeah, the client wasn't committed to the work and they weren't doing. Hold on a minute. If they've paid money to work with you, they're committed to the work. Anything else has to be the responsibility of the coach or the therapist or the consultant, whatever you want to call it. So I think it's that ownership that really defines a professional. So how I see this chat going is, effectively, how can people get to a stage where this is a primary or significant source of income? Because then it's a profession, from a monetary point of view. And what's the key? Could we agree at some point throughout today's chat about what does it take for people to consider themselves professional, i.e. competent, credible, and creating value for their clients? That's my take on it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Graham.
I like that last bit about someone being able to believe themselves in it, because the amount of people I've met across my journey through hypnosis, the number of people who are very, very competent hypnotists, yet they don't believe in themselves, can be detrimental to their own work, because we've all seen how hypnosis can be. Many people have come into hypnosis because of their own personal journey with, I don't know, a trauma or anything that it may have been. And therefore, when they come into this realm and they try to break a barrier in order to be able to show people what they're doing, sometimes they get a little bit caught up in the past of things, which then prevents them or hampers them from being able to do the very best thing they can do. Now, that doesn't mean they're not a professional hypnotherapist. They could have seen 10, 20, 30, 40, even just one client and done a really, really good job and keep doing really good jobs. In my personal opinion, a professional hypnotherapist is someone who's taken payment to be able to assist someone and done the best job they possibly can do. Now, we all know in this world, you can't fix everyone. And I use the term fix very lightly, because that's pretty much what we're there. We want to be able to do. But, as you just said before, it's not just down to the client. It's also down to your knowledge. It's down to your practice. For me, once you become a professional, you truly are a professional because you can go on and share your skill. Now, I completely agree with what you were saying just before about the coaching industry. Someone who can just try and throw it onto top of people, because everyone thinks there's this marketing strategy now of how I can give you all the next bit of information. Personally, for me, and not to blow a bubble for me, I like to think I became a professional when I was able to share my information for free and actually be able to get people understanding something. I've got a very weird way of thinking, as you've probably seen over the few months that we've got to know each other. I'm very, very visual, ridiculously visual. If it comes down to resolving something, I want to draw people a picture. And so when it comes down to sharing information with people, it's usually because I've took in something a little bit different on my spectrum of how I learn. So therefore, I like to share information because it breaks down the barrier, which may assist someone to be able to do something that little bit easier. Now, although that could be with hypnotherapy, it could be something with business details, information, wherever it may be, and being able to share that information, for me, makes you the true professionalist, because not only are you managing your business and your skills as a hypnotherapist, you're also understanding everything else that goes in that business marketplace in order to take it up to that next level. But how can people make themselves like that? I think it all comes down to practice, doesn't it? If you go into the big wide world worrying that people or something's going to happen, sometimes, we've talked about the law of attraction and things. Sometimes that can bring it towards you because you're only ever looking at the negative. I had an experience with my son last weekend where he realized during half term he thought he hadn't done a bit of homework which he needed to do. And the first thing he did, he went into panic mode because he thought about the end game. My son's very, very clinician sort of based, that the fact that having thought of detention would really hamper him. He would never like to go into into detention, and that's all he can think of. I haven't done his homework, therefore detention. So therefore he went into this mode. And some people do that with their own businesses. I think they never think about what the easier path could be. They always just think of that end game of right or wrong. Whereas when it comes to hypnosis as well, people just think they're going to go into hypnosis or they're not. They don't think about, well, what if this person's a kinesthetic learner? What about if they're a visual learner? What about if they're an audible learner? And if you wanted to do some sort of phenomenal work with them, then you have to be able to access them different areas, and you won't ever get it right the first time. I've done impromptu hypnosis on hundreds and hundreds of people, and the amount of times I've got it wrong is probably 25%, if not more, because you have to be able to play in these areas, and you have to be able to demonstrate and understand them and take them to that next level. And if you're willing to have that moment of adjustment at a last second, for me, that again is what starts to take you into that professional realm. Does that make sense, Adam?
It totally makes sense. And I think, there's the two parts of that I really like. One is, putting yourself out for kind of almost public scrutiny in some way. If you're teaching something or sharing something, or what I do, about a quarter of all my hypnosis sessions, if they're interesting enough, I kind of put them on my podcast. But it's kind of saying, right, it's out there. Anyone, and this is where a lot of technology is kind of going, and blockchain that I know you're very familiar with, it's all open source. So people can kind of look into it and kind of scrutinize it and say, well, what's actually happening here? And I think, that's why, there are hypnotherapists of the past. If you think of the Milton Ericksons and, even the Richard Bandlers, they were quite happy to do interventions with people with an audience. Milton Erickson would have people observing what he did in the therapy room, and I think that elevates you to a certain level of professionalism. If you say, look, I'm happy for people to observe what I do and that kind of stuff. So there's that element. And I also like the analogy of professional sport, because for me, like an amateur. So, a quick anecdote. Around about 4 or 5 years ago, I started really doing a lot of phobia work. And I looked inwards and I said, look, for me to feel congruent in this, do I have any irrational fears left? And my biggest irrational fear at that point in time was doing stand-up comedy. The idea of doing that absolutely terrified me. So I said to myself, look, if I can't shift this anxiety within myself, I have absolutely no right to do anything with any client whatsoever, because I'm not walking my talk. So at that point, I basically went on the open mic comedy circuit in London, did, over 6 months, about 25 gigs. And the first were terrifying. And this is with me doing all this kind of hypnosis and NLP techniques and that kind of stuff. I still had the adrenaline and all that kind of stuff, but it goes with time. And then you reach that point where it doesn't faze you at all. And when people said, right, are you a stand-up comedian? Immediately I'm like, well, not at all. Just because I'm doing stand-up comedy doesn't make me a comedian. And I said, look, do you ever play football in the park? And they go, yeah, occasionally I'll kick a ball around. I said, does that make you a footballer? And they're like, well, no, not at all. And I said, why not? And they said, well, no one's paying me. So I think that distinction of being competent enough to be paid for your services makes you a professional. Now, there was a couple of stand-up comedy gigs that I did where at the end of the night, they hand a bucket around and people put money in there and you kind of walk away with 10, 20 pounds or something like that. Did that make me a professional? No fucking way. No way. Like there are levels to these kind of games. Weirdly, and this is the last thing I'll say about stand-up comedy. My very first stand-up comedy gig, I acquired a hypnosis client. And I justified it to myself that I was the highest paid stand-up comedian on their first gig ever, because I did 5 minutes of material and I acquired a client that spent £500 with me on stand-up comedy. So multiply that by an hour, and I kind of figured out that I was on thousands of pounds on my first stand-up comedy, because there was hypnosis material in the stand-up comedy that I was doing. But still didn't make me a professional. And I think it's two key things. Is it something that is important to you to be good at and you want to do? And for me, I never wanted to be a comedian. It was simply a way to face a fear and develop skills that I didn't have yet. But secondly, are people willing to pay you consistently? Are you willing to kind of put in the hours to get good at that thing? So for me, would I consider myself a professional hypnotist? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, no question. You know, I'm dedicated to it. I've put in the hours, and, you know, I work with a lot of paying clients. Would I consider myself a professional stand-up comedian? Nowhere near. And I wouldn't want to be. It's not important to me. So I think that's the kind of distinctions. But, you know, in the audience, we want to hear from you. What do you consider to make someone a professional hypnotherapist? Do you consider yourself either an amateur or a professional hypnotherapist as things stand? And whichever side of the line you think you are on right now, why? What's the distinction there? What would it take for you to, if you don't consider yourself a professional, what is the rules that you have for yourself for you to consider yourself a professional, and vice versa? Raise your hand. We'll get you up on stage. Really keen to hear your thoughts. Equally, are there people out there, hypnotherapists, you may even be aware of them, that definitely are working with paying clients, you know, definitely are, you know, using it as a source of income, that you wouldn't consider are professionals? You know, we're not here to name and shame, but, you know, is there certain things that they do that you consider unprofessional, and therefore they're not really a professional hypnotherapist? Because I'm, you know, probably, you know, my kind of interest in NLP, it's that obsession with the distinctions. What's the difference that makes the difference? So if someone isn't, you know, if they're getting paid to do hypnotherapy, but they're still not a professional, why is that? And that'd be interesting to explore. Can you think of a situation like that, Graham, where someone definitely is getting paid for hypnotherapy, and yet you still wouldn't consider them a hypnotherapist? Obviously not kind of revealing names there, but what is it perhaps that they do or don't do that is that distinction?
Yeah, I can definitely think of some one or thing, especially someone who admitted that their way of doing hypnotherapy before is by laying someone down with a set of headphones on and just playing their MP3 to them, because the protocol that they have simply was good enough to cleanse whatever it was, or in their words, created enough mumble jumble in order to be able to achieve that. So that was definitely one for me, which took away a lot of credibility of what could have been a very good course. But yeah, then it took away, it didn't give me what I needed, and yeah, credibility was completely lost instantaneously. I think another thing as well, Adam, is not just about being a hypnotherapist, being a hypnotist as well. I think that's a very, very key skill. Many of us can put people into hypnosis in a therapy room because it's a completely different situation. Also, just being able to demonstrate hypnosis, you know, on that moment, if you was to meet someone, so, you're a hypnotist, can you hypnotize me? You know, many of us, and I think since becoming a senior in the army, I've backed out from it more, only because then I think about what ifs and things like that. But many times you just need to be able to say, yeah, sit down, do this, do that. And you know, many of us who know Carl Smith, it doesn't take any edging to get him to do a demonstration. So as well as a hypnotherapist, when is it that you become a professional hypnotist to be able to do this sort of thing? And we'd love to get you up on stage. As we always say, it's a completely safe area for you to talk. We are recording, so like we said, if you know someone, just like I did a minute ago, no need to mention that person's name or anything, but please do come up and join us, because it helps get this conversation going along. And if you joined a little bit later, we are only doing an hour tonight, so we are only going until 10 o'clock. It's been a really busy week for us, so we wanted to get the conversation up and going. I can see Steve come raise his hand. Is he? Here he is. I knew it wouldn't be long till you was up here, Steve. How's things, mate?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Yeah, missed you guys last week. It's
yeah,
it was lovely.
Yeah. Well, Adam was away, and myself and Rowan, whatever that, not the big C word, but whatever that fluey sort of chesty coffee thing.
I know.
Yeah, it wiped me out, and you could possibly still hear it in my voice now. But anyway, for you, Steve, when is it that you find becoming a professional hypnotherapist or hypnotist is?
Well, my first thought is you know, when we get paid, then that's the nature, that's the definition, one of the definitions of the word. But I met two very, what you might call professional lady hypnotists at Carl Smith's weekend a few weekends back, and they work for a charity, so they're never going to get paid. And I do some pro bono work for clients from time to time. So does that mean when I'm working with those clients, I'm no longer become professional? So I don't think it's just about the money. For me, looking back on my experience, I think I really only came professional when I could just start every session without having to do any preparation. Now, don't get me wrong, I do preparation very often with clients, but when I could just deal whatever was thrown at me in whatever situation, whether it was in session, whether it was on the street, as you said just now, if somebody asks you, they see you in your hypnotist t-shirt and, oh, what's that all about? And then you can just jump straight in and do something impromptu, either in a therapeutic setting or a social setting. For me, that's when you start to become professional. I think when people are unprofessional, and this isn't to have a go at anyone because we all go through a learning process, I think it's when we're still having to go onto certain Facebook groups and, has anybody got a script for this, or has anybody got an idea of how to deal with that? I don't think we can call ourselves professional at that stage. We're still learning, I think, at that stage.
Yeah, I do agree in elements. Yeah, I think you shouldn't have to go. Well, you should have to go and try and find information, but I think it also is what Adam said before. Whatever course you've done, you should have also found the competence during that course in order to not have to ask them questions. So yeah, I completely agree, and it's a very difficult one as well. Also, Jenny, I noticed you've raised your hand there. I have tried to invite you on stage. You need to click the tick to say that you can come up if you want to come up to the stage. But yeah, no, I do completely agree there that you have to be able to manage the expectation of what it is that you've done, and that's very much what we said before. Many people become hypnotherapists, but they don't necessarily believe in themselves. And I think that little group question bit is one of them elements. Or unfortunately, and I've seen it in courses when I've taught, just sometimes courses don't necessarily give everyone everything they need, and it's part of the reason, back to what I shared before, is why I've been so free giving with some of the information that I have, because I've had people on courses which haven't known some basics, and it hurts me really. And unfortunate enough that I can share whatever I need to, because I believe we should be able to. Adam, have you got anything on there, and then we'll go over to Jenny?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point in terms of getting paid and having that confidence. Weirdly, I mean, outside of my hypnosis, I'm doing a PR campaign at the moment with a medical social media company, because actually over lockdown, a lot of doctors and senior nurses, surgeons even, were going on public platforms like Facebook or WhatsApp groups to get second opinions and insight from colleagues. And I'm sure, these surgeons and doctors would consider themselves professionals. I don't think they would think any less of themselves because they're asking the advice of other people that they respect. But I do get your point, Steve, that there is this element, I think, particularly in the early days, where it almost has this kind of magic metaphor where a script is a spell, and if I just read this script at people, I'm going to suddenly magically produce a result. And I think, we've had many a conversation on this room about, scripts. For me, reading a script at a client does not make you a professional hypnotherapist, because it doesn't take into account the client in front of you. And for me, true hypnotherapy needs the sensory acuity and the calibration of the client in front of you. So, I certainly don't think it makes you less professional, particularly if you're getting advice from really respected people that know their stuff. Like, getting second opinions from people wouldn't necessarily, in my mind, make you less professional. But being a slave to the comfort blanket of a script or, a protocol, even when it isn't suitable or relevant to the client in front of you, yeah, I think that doesn't make you a professional, because you should, at some level, have that kind of broad enough toolkit and an awareness to be able to use what's right. But at that point, Steve, that you made of, you feel professional, whether you can, actually are professional or not, but you feel professional when, things don't go to plan and you can kind of handle it in a really effortless way. Definitely. I would completely concur with that. It definitely makes you feel like, you're not, you're not in this kind of rigid way where everything has to go perfect for you to get the result. When you've got people where, there's many moving parts, I felt I was more professional at the point where I started doing group hypnosis sessions with a room of, 10, 15 people and that kind of stuff. And then, there might be, police sirens that go off and you can manipulate those distractions in the right way. And I think that ability to kind of take whatever's going around and still kind of fuse it into, the hypnotherapy you're doing, definitely you get a sense of being more professional there. Jenny, welcome up to the stage. What was your question or point that you wanted to make?
Just be aware you're muted, Jenny. You've got the microphone in the bottom right-hand corner.
Sorry. Hi. No, it's more an observation and more a comment. I'm reasonably new to hypnosis. I trained last year, but I've become reasonably successful reasonably quickly. And I think there's not any one thing for me that makes me feel professional. I've gone through the stages of using scripts, but I need to get confidence, but always watching the client and, being not just reading the script, but being in tune and following my intuition's huge, I think, for me around this. I think anyone can read scripts, anyone can train, but it's around being in tune with the client, and which has already been mentioned. I think for me, I feel professional now. I mean, because I get paid. I have clients that want to reschedule, clients that feel a difference, and I also started off working with just people that I knew, obviously, as you do, but now I have people from all over the country coming into my website, booking sessions and coming back for more. So when I knew that I've always had a little bit of success, but now I'm getting more and more. And pretty much, I mean, I'm a practicing, getting paid hypnotherapist. So I don't feel like I know everything. I'm always learning. And I think, there's always professional development to do. So just because we go for advice or learn things doesn't mean we should always be doing that. So that's, for me, I'm new, but I do feel like I'm a professional. The other thing I wanted to say is that I was in a training recently with a 30-year practicing hypnotherapist. We were put into a breakout room together. We had to do this protocol on each other. She was terrible. And even when I was in hypnosis, really deep in hypnosis, my conscious mind was saying, ask me a question, ask me this, ask me that, So, and all she did was when we went in hypnosis, she was telling me about how good she was, how she'd done this, that, and worked with whoever. And so she considers herself a professional, but I felt like she was very unprofessional. So there we go. That's what I wanted to contribute. Thank you.
No, I think that's really great, and the way you've said it. If you're getting constant feedback, people recommending you, I completely agree. It is being professional, and even to the point where you said you never stop learning. 100%, you never stop learning. It's the reason why I created my hypnosis online meetups is because CPD is massively valuable, and not everyone knows everything. I don't even know everything, not by any stretch of the imagination. And there's a reason why it's called continual professional development. If you're not doing CPD and you think you know everything, for me personally, that is a sign that you're not necessarily professional. You need to always have a little top up of something every now and then. And there's even people who think they know everything, who've joined some of the meetups I've done in the past, who've even gone away learning even more when they all thought they were brilliant and stuff. So I think that's very, 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 very poignant in exactly what you put there, Jenny, and really good as well. Irene, welcome up to the stage. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really, really good, thank you. What is your point you'd like to bring?
So I'm newly qualified. I thought it was when you get
seen that the other day.
I know, thank you. I thought it was
congratulations.
When you get your own clubhouse room, that's how you're a professional. That's not what I wanted to say. So it's probably shown what everybody has already said, that I think it's a bit like success. We all measure it quite differently. We have our own ways of measuring it. For me, I would measure it in that, yeah, I don't know everything, and I would measure it in getting the results. That's how I measure it, but someone else might measure it in getting paid. And I think it is quite subjective in what we call professionalism and how we measure that. I think also as well is that as someone who's just newly qualified, is that to be quite careful of having that fear of having that fear of professionalism and hiding behind it and using it as an excuse to actually not do anything and to not try things out, and to use it to hide behind that fear and not actually see anyone, because it is quite scary when you get qualified. I kind of think like, oh shit, I'm qualified now, I need to be a professional, but I don't know everything. So there is a lot of fear in those early days, certainly for me. And it's just becoming more confident with just more and more practice and more awareness of new things and all the things that I learn, and just keep doing those. But yeah, I think it's quite subjective, but it's an exciting time. It's exciting becoming a professional.
Absolutely. And I think you put something really, really key onto there, then, to the fact that when it comes to working with people, if you don't know what you're necessarily doing, be honest with the client. I've done it in the past where people have asked me for different things. I can't think off the top of my head, but I've simply said, I haven't worked with this before. I'm willing to work with you on not necessarily a practice case, but just a case study. Let's see how we get on. And if we do get on and it makes a change for you, then, feel free to make a donation towards me. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to learn if you don't try. And if you don't try, then you've got to learn somewhere. But I truly believe in being clear with the client at exactly what you're doing. Or obviously you can refer out. I think referring as well is something that shows your professionalism as well, because you then know that it's not your niche. Not everyone can do every niche. I've seen some web pages where people have ridiculous amounts of things, literally hundreds of what they can help people with, where you could bracket 2/3 of that into just anxiety, for example. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good point that you've put there. That you've got to be able to take clients on. You're going to naturally be nervous at first, and that's why I'm sure you've done it during your training, having some free clients. Them clients will end up recommending you, and then finding your way to do an advertisement and looking back at them things, pushing that out too. Adam, if you.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations on the qualifications, and I do think, although qualifications, sometimes you see hypnotherapists that are kind of almost kind of education junkies, and they've got so many letters after their name, and clearly, I mean, you're right, Irene, it is subjective, and I think for certain hypnotherapists there is perhaps a belief that the more qualifications or the more certificates they have on the wall behind them, the more professional they are. And that might be that's the criteria for them, and it seems like for you, Irene, it's getting results for the client as it is for me. And I think, I'm quite happy to have less, I don't put any letters after my name. I don't, really think about the accreditation of kind of societies or that kind of stuff. But for some people, those things are really, really important. For me, it's about thinking about the client, because we're in a very client-centric industry, and I think if any hypnotherapist worries more about their qualifications than the value that they create for their client, that seems incongruent to me. Surely the most important person in this whole thing is the client in front of you at any one point in time. So having that obsession with results there is great. And I think Jenny's point that she made that, having that, and I think although it is subjective, in hypnosis, it's not the same as other industries. I use kind of cage fighting and football as a metaphor, but if someone pretended to be awesome at football or awesome at cage fighting, And they just, yeah, I'm amazing at this and I've done so many different things. The moment they go out on the pitch or the moment they get in that cage, everyone knows how good they are. Everyone knows how good they are because it's public and you can compare competency against someone else, and then it's there for everyone to evaluate. And for me, I think we had this conversation around the time of the Olympics. What would it take for someone to be, an Olympic, medalist in hypnotherapy? And it's very tricky to do because it's very subjective, and you've got all different kind of modalities, and you've got all different kind of approaches and things like that. It's challenging to do, but at some level, I feel like being a professional is certainly having the competency, having the understanding, having the sensory acuity of knowing what approach to use and knowing how to respond maybe to an abreaction or, the micro expressions, having that ability to do that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's just competency. I think it's about personal standards as well. Things like ethics, integrity. If you've got someone that's a really good hypnotist, but actually their goal is to extract as much money out of their client as they possibly can, rather than, doing what they can, I wouldn't consider that person a professional, and I think for me, if, I think a lot in terms of Venn diagrams, but a professional is that kind of balance between competency and standards and the real professional, because you could have someone with very high standards that isn't very good. And you can have an absolute professional with very low standards, and they don't really have that integrity, and they don't really do the preparation, and maybe they don't even have insurance and things like that. So that kind of ideal hybrid between being very competent and having high standards and thinking also about the client first and foremost, probably for me, that's what makes someone a professional. And it seems like where your mind's at, well, for all the people that we've had up on stage, it's thinking about the client. How do we create value for them? And the fact that we get paid for it, actually, it doesn't mean that it's about the money. It just means that that's a good signal that value is being created. And also, as we know, that when people pay for a service, it can cement the change. And for some people, get them to the point of threshold where a change is even possible. So, for me, the financial element is just a side effect of creating value for clients. And it seems like that's certainly a bit that we're all on the same page there. Graham, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have that balance. And I think the other little thing as well is, obviously I'm going to use you Irene as the example, and Jenny, in fact, because you both mentioned how you're new to therapy, and if you're taking in your clients' work, then obviously what you need to ensure is that at some point you're going to start to increase your value because you are so looked after. So and if you're looked after, then obviously that's going to mean that if you're getting more and more clientele, you can't always balance everything, and you don't want to burn yourself out. So therefore, you've got to raise your prices. If someone still wants you, then they'll follow you. And obviously, when you start to raise your prices, that's when you know you're in demand, and that shows as well you're doing a professional job, the correct sort of job. So definitely looking at that as well is what you need to you have that balance with in order to be able to create that professional world of where you're going to be working from. But as well, yeah, just the referral factor. If someone's coming to you and say, oh yeah, you work with my friend so-and-so, or I heard from this person, again, that just shows what a professional job you are doing, and just keep with it and maintain it, because challenge yourself still. Never just go into a slippery slope of thinking this is exactly what I need to do with every person. Still challenge yourself, and you will you'll definitely be able to work away with that and keep making things even better.
I think Irene took her mic off mute a couple of times. Did you want to follow up on anything there, Irene?
Sorry, I didn't see that.
No, I was just agreeing with everything that you were saying.
Oh.
It almost popped into my head at one point where I was thinking, when's a hypnotherapist become an expert hypnotherapist?
Very good. I like that.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. For me, it's about specialization. And we did a clubhouse room in the early days about to niche or not to niche, I think is what we called the room. And I think how, for me, how you become an expert, I almost look at it as an inverted or a pyramid. You know, the base is, you know, almost in any profession you have generalists, and certainly I think there's a lot of hypnotherapists that you know, are generalists, and and as Graham quite rightly said, they'll have a list of about 200 things on their website, and they'll even use the word specialize, or they'll say, you know, I specialize in, and then there's a big list of everything from blushing to nail biting to, you know, fear of rodents and everything on there. And for me, I think, how do you identify the distinctions if you spread yourself that thin? You know, so I think how you move up the ladder in a way is that you say, well, right, well, there's a generalist, and then you decide what your niche is, and then you become a specialist. And by being a specialist for long enough, you then acquire all the distinctions and the shortcuts by focusing on that area. And then if you get to a stage where not only do you know what to do, but you can explain to other people what to do, then that positioning elevates you to an expert. And for me, there is one step higher than the expert, which is the celebrity. And you see that in all different sectors. I would say in chefs, for example, you can have someone that can cook pretty much anything, and they're the generalist. And then you might find someone that specializes in a particular type of food, so they become a specialist, and then they become known for being really good at that, and they can teach other people, and they're an expert. But you see these celebrity chefs on TV because they're now known to a wide audience for being really good at that particular thing, and it is that kind of pathway. Now, not everyone wants to be a celebrity, and not everyone wants to be an expert. And as we know in hypnotherapy, for a lot of people, it's not that they've got these huge ambitions. For a lot of people, it is almost like a lifestyle business or a side hustle where they really enjoy it. I make a very good living from hypnosis. I'm very upfront. I describe it as my lucrative hobby. You know, it's not my main source of income. I don't want it to be my main source of income, you know, and the fact that I can see, you know, normally anything between, 5 and 8 clients a week, I'm happy with that, you know, but it's enough for me to be in the game and know what's going on. But I do specialize in different areas. So I think how you become an expert is finding a niche, specializing that niche, acquiring the distinctions within that niche, and being able to explain that to other people as a way of demonstrating evidence that you have knowledge in that area. That would be my definition of how you become an expert hypnotherapist. Graham or anyone on stage, I don't know if anyone's got any other thoughts on how you become an expert.
Yeah, that is a really good question. How do you become an expert? I think it's fair to say, if I was going to name an expert that comes to mind for me straight away, it's got to be someone like Kaz Riley, someone who goes completely into an area where no one else really wants to dig and delve in the term of sex and sexual freedom, where literally around the world you are known for that niche. Literally, I think you become an expert where if ever you used to type something into Google, your name's right there at the top. Now I know, Adam, for you, you're very well known in the phobia world. To the fact that am I right in quoting it was the Royal Mail who got hold of you the other day for that interview that you did?
Yeah, I mean, being featured in the media certainly helps with the positioning, but also you're right with Google. So I mean, if anyone wants to do a little test now and just put phobia expert in Google, if it's the UK version of thing, I think I'm on the first page for that one. And that's entirely based on having a dedicated website for phobias, having lots of content on there and being regularly in the media for that. And I think that helps, you know, because anyone could pay for the adverts at the top or the bottom of the page, but if you're there organically, I think that helps position you as an expert. But really it comes from, I think, knowledge, techniques, and having the hours. You know, once you've helped a few hundred people with one specific thing, it not only does it help you as the hypnotherapist, but it massively reassures the client, because I still do those free consultation calls, and the belief, I think, for a lot of people when they've had a phobia for their whole life is, come on, I've had this my entire life. Are you seriously saying that you can just kind of get rid of it in a few sessions? And if you have, not only helped a few hundred people get rid of a phobia, but helped lots of people with their specific phobia. And what I tend to do is pace their experience. Because I've worked with so many phobics, I know the internal strategy that causes anxiety. So when you say to them, look, you know, I know you're saying that you've got a fear of birds or pigeons, and probably a lot of people can't understand where you're coming from. But would I be right in thinking that if there is a bird, the anxiety is higher when it's closer to you than when it's further away? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, and if there's more birds than less, that creates more anxiety, right? And they're like, yeah. And if they're moving and it looks like they're coming toward you, that increases anxiety. Once you've entered their world and you know their phobia better than they know their phobia, then it gives them confidence that, hold on, this person can actually help. And that just comes from experience. Once you've known so many people, you see the patterns, and humans are pattern recognition creatures. We're very good at recognizing the patterns, but it's difficult to recognize the patterns if you only work with one phobia client, you know, a month. How do you see the patterns? Would you know, if you do, you know, a few hundred in a year, well, then you're going to see the patterns because you've got a frame of reference to compare and see what's similar in that area. So for me, specialization absolutely is the key thing. And once you've acquired that knowledge, then how you move up to going from, you know, a specialist to an expert is being known for that knowledge, you know, and luckily we're in an environment now, it's never been so easy to share knowledge with an audience. That could be on a podcast, that could be on YouTube, that could be on a, you know, on a clubhouse room like this. It could be on, you know, invited on a stage or doing group workshops. You know, for those people that have the competency, it's never been easier to showcase that competency. And you know, if someone truly is good in that area, they don't mind anyone observing, critiquing, and that kind of stuff, because someone that's a true professional treats the feedback not as a personal attack, but as an opportunity to get better. You know, and I think that's the true element of a professional. They don't get complacent. They want to constantly learn, constantly get better, and they don't take things personally. So there is that kind of desire to constantly evolve and kind of, as we know, there's levels to this game, keep leveling up.
I completely agree with you there, Adam. And it comes back to the comment I've said on many past clubhouses here. As soon as you can start utilizing something that another client said to you on another client with the same appearance of what they're displaying, for them to then feel like you are reading their mind, then that's when you've really hit that nutshell, in my personal opinion. Jenny, I've noticed you've been off your mic for a little while. Was you trying to say something to us?
Yeah, I was just going to say about the expert, how you become an expert in a different whatever. I think for me, I got into hypnotherapy through my own weight loss journey with hypnotherapy. And so I do specialize in weight loss. I do chronic pain and anxiety as well. But I think having a real understanding, I know you can work on anything if you haven't experienced it, but weight loss particularly is, if you have your own experience, you understand. I always say that someone who has never had a weight issue can't even understand. It's very simple, you know, what you eat, you know, what goes in and how much exercise. And we all know that that's rubbish once we get into this field. But I think part of being an expert is having the knowledge, but also if you've got some experience, can help you as well become an expert, if that makes sense. I know there's a lot of hypnotherapists out there that do group weight loss, that do things that I wouldn't do personally, because I believe, and that's success I have, is doing individual basis and having an understanding and learning about what's going on for that person as to why, you know, is the why. So for me, I think, yeah, having, not always, but having some personal experience can help be an expert. And whether that's an expert as in worldwide, being known as an expert worldwide, or just being an expert in your field, in your own patch, you know.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, makes absolute sense. And that personal journey, I think, is so important as a rapport builder as well. You know, once you can relate to the very experience that your client is in, you know, it builds huge amounts of rapport. And also you can become the evidence that, change is possible, because that's one of the key things that gets people stuck there is this belief of permanence, and the locus of control is no longer within them. And they start feeling it's going to be this way forever. And they're very desperate. A lot of clients are very desperate because they've tried so many different things to the point of learned helplessness in many cases. So if you can say, well, the reason why I do what I do is because I had this issue and I had to figure a way out, and I did figure a way out. And then I kind of feel this duty to help other people, find the way out of the prison that I managed to escape from myself. That's not only a rapport builder, but also, if you've anyone seen the Simon Sinek TED Talk on the power of why, or read his book, once people understand why you do what you do, then, they're more on board with your mission. And I think there are a lot of hypnotherapists out there. I would say the vast majority have got that similar kind of experience. They experienced something themselves. They got stuck in some way. They solved it because they had to learn how to kind of figure it out. And then they thought, hold on, if I can do it for myself, I can do it for someone else. And that's a really powerful story. Great for marketing, great for social media posts, because it's true. And there's a lot of bullshit marketing out there. So if you've got a genuine story and you can connect with people in that way, I think that's really powerful. Steve, good to see you back up on the stage. Did you have something you wanted to follow up on?
Yeah, you're page 2, unfortunately, Adam, from Dorset anyway.
I'm the number 1 on my one, but maybe it's got the cookies in there. It knows I'm watching myself.
We're 100 miles away here. So it's all done on geography, isn't it? Just going back to Irene's excellent question, actually, of what constitutes an expert. I think you don't have to be necessarily niching into any one area to be an expert. Let's have a look, for example, at, say, Mike Mandel or Freddie Jacquin. They're very good, what you might call general hypnotists, hypnotherapists. Carl Smith mentioned him earlier. Obviously he focuses around post-trauma and that sort of thing. And he uses this expression, which again comes out of the military, of a subject matter expert, an SME. And you can certainly niche into something and become an expert in that. But I think you can also be expert in a more generalized way, like a GP, a general practitioner doctor here in the UK. They've got a very high level of knowledge on a more general basis. But then above them, you have the consultants who specialize. Not that I'm comparing us to doctors, incidentally.
Why not compare us to doctors? We're both in the health profession and caring profession. But I think, that element, you're absolutely right, Steve, of a general practitioner. And I think, prior to COVID, I think COVID was the catalyst for a lot of hypnotherapists to move online. I think prior to that, certainly in my individual case, 95% of my client sessions were face-to-face prior to COVID. I would say it's the inverse now. I would say 95% of my sessions are online and only 5% are face-to-face. I love the face-to-face stuff, but I'm fortunate enough that I was close enough to London to have a Harley Street practice. And when you've got a big audience around you, you can afford to specialize. You can afford to specialize because the audience is big enough. If you're in rural Yorkshire and you decide to specialize in, a particular type of anxiety, there isn't enough people in your patch at that point to make that business viable. So therefore, your specialism at that point is you're the GP of hypnotherapy. You're the hypnotherapist for that region. I think COVID has changed that, because if other people have had a similar experience to me where, they've gone from like a tiny percentage of their clients being online to the majority, well, then suddenly we've all got the English speaking world as our potential client base. And therefore the tendency or the ability to specialize and niche makes a lot more sense based on things like Google algorithms, YouTube algorithms, social media algorithms. If you just say, right, I'm a hypnotherapist, you're competing with every other hypnotherapist. But if you are the go-to expert on a specific issue, then how do people find that? Well, they tend to use search engines, or they tend to ask for referrals. So if, anyone in this room you know, if I said, can you recommend someone that is great for grief? Okay. You're not going to recommend, you know, that hypnotherapist that, you know, doesn't really do that, and they just do general hypnotherapy. If you can think of someone that really specializes in grief, that's going to be who you refer to. So I think niching helps in many ways, from a marketing perspective, from a referral perspective, but also from a competency perspective, because I think the more that you focus on one area, the more distinctions that you create. But I absolutely agree. You know, you've got people like Mike Mandel, you know, stage hypnotist, transitioned into, you know, hypnotherapist. I think he's great. And he's clearly very well read. You know, I listen to Brain Software, you know, every episode. You know, he clearly has knowledge. Is he a professional? Absolutely. You know, he's got the depth of knowledge. He clearly has the distinctions, and he's got a big enough client base and lots of different things to be able to pick and choose the right things. But I do think that he developed that skill set in a different time, and I think it would be difficult for someone to mirror that now, just because of the way that the digital world rewards people being in a niche and being known for being in a niche. If that makes any sense, Steve.
Yeah, it does. I think, you know, we've got to face facts. COVID has changed a lot of things, and my business dropped off a cliff several times during COVID. Every time Boris announced a change in the lockdown rules, it dropped off, and I had to rebuild it again. Interestingly enough, at the end of lockdown, I was getting a lot of inquiries from people locally who wanted to actually see someone, and a lot of people, not just hypnotherapists, but counselors and psychotherapists, weren't seeing people because they were working out of maybe a shared building, and the building owners had just decided not to open it. And currently, 75% of my client base is face-to-face work, and I didn't really expect that, but you know, I'm happy to meet that demand.
I was going to ask the percentage there, and it's great, you know, for you. You know, I love seeing clients face to face. I still haven't gone back to doing my workshops yet, because I love doing the workshops, but you know, it's kind of different for kind of groups. I guess my one final point, because I know it's coming to the end of the hour, and I know we're going to wind things up soon. But one of the other things that I would say that I would also link to being a professional is having the right equipment. And I do think, you know, I'm a real audio and tech geek, but for me, when I moved from being primarily in Harley Street seeing clients face to face to being primarily online seeing clients, you know, over that, I invested in really good microphones, like really good kit, so that I could give them a good experience. Because I think, you know, I've heard stories of, you know, people in the past, like some rusty old, you know, CD player, and they put like relaxing music in the background. And I think if we're charging a premium to clients and really creating value for them, you know, being a professional means investing in the right kind of stuff. Now, we're not an, you know, an asset or a kind of a tech heavy industry, but if for people like me that are now seeing the majority of their clients online, you know, have a decent computer, have decent streaming, you know, stuff, have decent microphones and that kind of stuff, because you're going to come across way more professionally. You know, back in the day when I was in Harley Street, I linked that even to dress code. I know there's a halo effect. If you kind of look the part, you know, if you've got a 3-piece suit and, you know, shiny watch and shiny shoes, it actually helps give reassurance to a client. To some extent, that's changed with the whole kind of Zoom way of working with hypnosis. But I'll still have a blazer, you know, so even if I've got a t-shirt, I'll put that on. It makes a difference in terms of how the client feels that you're treating it seriously. And I think, you know, I would agree with Jenny. It isn't just one thing. You know, being a professional is taking all these little things that in and of themselves probably make no difference at all. But when you compound all of them, they can make a dramatic difference. And then it's obvious who's the amateur, who's the professional, because, you know, when you do so many things and you raise those standards and you really think about the client and you prepare and you think about the protocol and you market in the right way and you follow up and all this kind of stuff. Well, yeah, it's easy to position yourself very different, you know, and there's a phrase that I love, and that is, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And what I take from that is that you don't need a huge advantage to dominate any industry. So, you know, if we make ourselves a tiny bit more professional than everyone else, then you look like the king of your industry in comparison, you know. And I think what's great about this conversation is, you know, there's lots of little things that you can do to really not necessarily be a professional, but position yourself as a professional. But as we know, you know, if you project a certain thing, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Even if you don't have the skills yet, if you treat yourself as an absolute professional, you become the professional. And I think it's always good to kind of keep raising our standards and keep thinking about the client. How do we create as much value as we can for them? Any final points, Graham? I know we're kind of winding things up now, but any final points from you?
No, I think you've just absolutely sealed it really there. To become a professional hypnotherapist, do your training, do your competency afterwards, see clients, start getting paid for clients to the point where you have to put your prices up, and continue with your continual professional development. Yeah, I think you know, it's common sense sort of things, but never just try and make yourself think that you're too big for your own boots. Always stay grounded and keep just doing the best thing you can do for your clients at all times. If you carry on with that, I think you'd be absolutely perfect. But yeah, as we just mentioned, we are going to be finishing now. It's been a really busy week for myself, and I know Adam needs to go and pump some iron for a little while. So everyone, I'd really do appreciate you joining us this evening. If you've got a topic that we haven't talked about and you do think it'd be something good to talk about, maybe you'd want to co-host with us at some point, drop us a message on Facebook or on Instagram. You can see the Instagram through our pages on here. Or if you know us on Instagram, I'm simply Graham Webber. Just drop us a little message prior to friend requesting, because I've slowed down on them a little bit more because I was getting some from all different weird and wonderful places. But yeah, it'd be good to hear more topics, so we keep things on tune for you guys. And hopefully we cross paths in person sooner rather than later. But other than that, everyone, do take care, look after yourselves, and we'll see you all again next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.